Preparing now, running through the streaming. So, welcome, Roger.
Glenn.
It's a wonderful time to have together for a few minutes and share some wisdom. And today's thinking was kind of interesting for me, and that was about expectations. And you know, we often say that we expect good and it will come good. And yes, expectation sets up the intention or sets up the whole, you know, idea about getting to a success. And so that's great. And
Yes.
so I thought I would ask you about expectations. What are the pros and cons of expectation? How do you look at that?
Yeah. Okay. So very quickly on the pros and then on the cons, and then would love to hear some insight from you as well, as a master coach. So the positive of expectations is like the other side of the coin of the negative. The negative is that we hold an expectation and then we have these distress and the disappointment waiting for it to be fulfilled, and then it maybe not being fulfilled. So the positive side, let's go right to the positive side, and then we'll come back to the cons. And the pros are that when one establishes an expectation with oneself or with another, then there's a kind of the weight of integrity. And so when a person says, I'm going to do this, and then another person believes them, and then that person who believed what the person said has an expectation. And so expectations are always a good thing to set up, particularly in relationships. Because if a person that I'm in a relationship with has expectations that are, shall I say, just not in accord with what I can produce or even what I'm interested in, then that's a false expectation. And so for the individual who's carrying the weight of a false expectation and then having it not work out because it's false, that's a lot of disappointment, and it's a lot of strain on oneself as one is holding that expectation. So in business, one of the things that happens a lot, and we could say that this is the same in coaching and in relationships, is that it really helps to set clearly expectations, which then there's an accountability feature to that. And then there's also I was there when I said that I would sort of feature to that. And those are all powers that both weigh on the person who's set the expectation and everybody else. And then it kind of predicts in advance that if a person is not going to fulfill the expectation, that they'll say something, that they'll be proactive and say, now looking at my calendar, if that expectation is about something in time, or I'm looking at my heart, if that expectation is something in a relationship, like, hey, Joe, Sally, heard you say, and therefore I am expecting that you will, love me or marry me or give me a job or support me in leveraging my preferences, all of those. So expectation is it's huge. And a little bit more on that, and then back to you, is that expectation is the heaviest of a whole array of things. And I'll just mention them. So less heavy than an expectation is a preference. So if I say, I'm not expecting you to do anything, but my preference is that you would do, all these things or this one thing. And the weight of a preference is nothing like the weight of an expectation. And then under the preference is something that's even a little bit more mysterious, and that is, I'll use the word aspiration. That a person has an aspiration, maybe they have never told anybody about it, and it's something that we may have shared or we may not have shared. But an aspiration is very light. But one of the problems with an aspiration, and it's a problem with preferences too, is that it's still it isn't. What am I trying to get at? It's not a very clear. So that's why setting clear expectations has a great power and a great weight. Establishing a kind of area of preferences. And what's the downside of a preference when you're in a relationship with a person and they don't fulfill, and you say to yourself, well, I was holding my preferences lightly and I didn't have an expectation. So then you don't really have a right to get angry or even, I mean, it's just a waste of time and energy to feel depressed or disappointed. So anyway, expectations are very powerful, and expectations are heavy, and expectations are hard for people to explain why they're not fulfilling. One of my big disappointments in life is that some of the people that I've experienced setting expectations with and having accountability with, then who did not fulfill, and I'm sure I haven't fulfilled a bunch of times too, then it becomes a part of either shame or frustration. This is a whole territory that we really don't want to go into unless we be clear and develop the capacity to say, I can't do this, even though I said that I would, and I need to renegotiate. So I'd like to hear from you on this, because it's such a powerful part of coaching, being a coach, being a coaching client, being a family member, being a person who's in a work situation, being someone who's on a board. Everybody can really do themselves a favor if they're super self-reflective and then say that they're going to fulfill on expectations and then actually do it, or communicate clearly about how it can't happen. Back to you.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The way I was thinking about also when you started saying about expectation for oneself. So I'll begin there, expectation for oneself
Yeah.
first. And the one word you use was aspiration. I love that word actually, because in reality, what I would say, I set up my expectation for myself in two or three realms. In life, we have three areas that are most common, four areas actually: time, money, relationships, and health. These are the four most important areas that people have situations with or handling it, There are other sub areas, but these are the four areas that I expect myself to do certain things, ability to do. So hopes and dreams is where it really gets started.
Mm.
So hopes and dreams is really starts that. You say, well, I would love to do that. Wishes and wants. It really start that energizes the whole thing. And then comes the next stage is the aspiration that you mentioned, that I aspire to do certain things. But then this is still in the mindset or the heart mind, if you will. Now comes the reality as to how does it transform into action? How does it transform into actual activity to get there? So
Yeah.
expectation is there to get there. There's a little, like the difference between the thought, speech, and the action and the outcome of the action. So now the expectation also sets in the outcome that's there. I expect to earn so much of money by the end of this year, for example, or I want to have a good relationship by the end of this year, whatever that may be. And so me healthy also, I should be able to run a mile, without
Yeah.
getting short
Well,
of breath.
You know, what's cool about what you're saying is that an aspiration is
Yeah,
something that just happens as a part of a kind of a non-substantial realm,
right,
whereas the action to be able to manifest
right,
something, to
right,
actually put this thing into the world,
right,
is a whole other, and requires time, by the way,
right, right,
and courage. Because if we're going to try to do something we've
right,
never done, then we're going to have to, if we don't have a natural sense of, wow, I'm just so full of it, then we have to like pump that up,
yeah,
mostly by making small steps,
right.
fail-safe systems, being in a system that where you can learn but you can't fail. And so it's very exciting.
And
And then the
so
question to that,
assessment of mismatch. I was going to use the word mismatch. Assessment of mismatch of what your expectation is and what your actually inner sources we have resources where or outer resources support. If we don't
exactly.
have this matched properly, well, you know what? You're heading for a non-fulfilled expectation. And so this is the coaching area which you're mentioning, small step and all the things. This is the coaching area which is so powerful to really for any one person. Now comes the communication clarity, which you mentioned.
Mm,
Expectation of my expectation be I may expect something. Did I share that with you? Did I connect with you about that? And did you agree that you will be able to do that? I mean, that's where the ball is dropped most of
yeah.
the time because that communication never happens. And so pros and cons. Pros is one thing. I would really say that expectation is an energy. It is a really a good energy
Mm,
because without expectation, I don't know how we can really charge something. It's like a charge. But then charge something and it starts in motion without knowing the laws of how the road is going to happen. I can start my car and start driving because I expect me to drive, but I don't know the rules of the road, or I don't know, those kinds of things. And so I think it's a balance part and the mismatch part that would be very crucial.
yeah. Well, pros and cons of expectations. What a great topic.
Thank you, Roger. I think this we just probably scratched the surface of it, but we do have like some ideas about say well by some coaching techniques that you mentioned. There is an outcome there that can be a very step at a time process that can be very helpful to people.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about that for a second on our way out. Is that when a person thinks about making
Mhm.
a plan for themselves,
Right,
they're going to have to be a coach for themselves,
right,
because the person who hasn't done the thing that the person wants to do,
hmm,
that is the same person that
right,
needs to be the person who will actually
right,
do it. And to
right,
get it from I've never done this before and I want to do it, if you can't just get there on your own, then as a coach for yourself, then you need to, one could
mm,
have a coach, and all the powerful outcomes that are leveraged by people who have even just a little bit of coaching is so incredibly powerful. And then once you feel, I mean, there's a whole uh, shall we say, strata of citizens that
mhm,
once they feel the power of being a coach to themselves, or having coaching from a coach to be able to strengthen the coach in themselves,
right,
many of those people then say, oh my gosh, I work in a school system and every teacher needs this. I think I'll become a coach and then I'll help out the school system. Same with the Veterans Administration. You work for the Veterans Administration and you think, wow, this is so aligned with what we're doing at the VA right now. I'm going to become a coach. And so it's want to do something, not do it. Then it's want to do something and coach yourself to do it. Can't get there? Okay, get a coach to do it. You got there, you liked it, the coach helped you, you think, oh my gosh, everybody in the world needs this, then consider becoming a coach. It's all
Right.
right there. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a great insight, Roger. And we'll see you again next time.